Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited to bring you Tanya. She's back. Well, Tanya, there you go. In my,
Hi.
she's back. And Andrew, first time on the Collective. Thanks very much for joining us, Shaun. Always good to see you. So, Tanya, last time you were artist slash photographer slash jujitsu practitioner slash
Yeah,
dreams.
doer of things, I think is what I said.
You said I like it a lot. Andrew, you're former military. Are you retired police officer?
Yeah, I'm
Or
medically retired,
yeah.
and I'm still active military, waiting for release, medical release.
Right on. In the reserves or right?
Yeah.
Right on. Right on. Good times. Well, we have an interesting thought process, at least what I want to go through today. But before I get anywhere, I do want to remind everybody to like the show, subscribe to it as per, and hit the notification bell. That way you get a little email every day we go live, which is every day. So that'd be great.
Dude, did you take your electrolytes this morning?
I got my electrolytes.
This is like
coffee.
It feels pretty seamless so far.
You've nailed
everything right to. Dude, this is good. I like it.
You know what I did? I had some of the Collective blend today.
Maybe that was it. Maybe that. Oh, the planets are aligning.
Notes of dark chocolate.
Namaste.
Andrew, if you don't know, Shaun has recently gotten me into coffee, like into the depths of coffee, and he said
you weren't into coffee before.
Well, I drank coffee. Like
he drank it.
I drank coffee, but it was like
he drank something that's loosely referred to as coffee by the general population.
An appreciation of good coffee.
Yeah.
You physically ingested. I don't know if you're in the depths yet. I think.
Yeah.
No.
I'm swimming in the shallows still.
He's a gator, he's just waiting right at the surface for this little wildebeest, and then he can drag him in.
You're about to get barrel rolled.
Well, so I went out and spent like $500 on a grinder just to get into the game. And now that I'm in the game, it's interesting learning how to do tastings and actual brewing methods. My V60 technique is getting better. I have a much more fluid motion now, getting a consistent timing on my my drawdown, and I even have some lingo down. What can I say? It's coming. It's coming.
Instant nerd.
Any thoughts or questions or things coming up before we jump off into the topic that I had selected for today?
No, I just got a little bit of feedback off the episode yesterday, and it was all very positive. I was going to say, of course, but I suppose I shouldn't say, of course. I would assume that everyone understands that it was freaking awesome. But the positive feedback that I was getting was more than normal. And not for me. I'm not talking about I get it. I'm talking about the episode. And so there must have been something going on in the episode that was extra rah sis boom bah. I'm not sure. So funnily enough, as I always do every day, reviewed the videos. I do them and then I watch them. And last night, poor Satch, who is our house guest still, he leaves this morning. He had to sit down in the home theater with me and watch the entire podcast or the second live potty last night. And now he knows what my routine is like. My apologies, Satch. But as I was watching it, there was lots of good things in that, but I'm not sure what stood out for a number of other people because, of course, I sometimes think, did we even accomplish anything today? So I think my perspective is totally skewed. So maybe we'll have to figure out what it was yesterday that we covered that was extra special. I don't know.
Off the top of my head, I think what we covered was the fact that you can have open communication about anything. And I think that is key for actually lends itself to what I wanted to go into today. Carl, hey all. Hope everyone is good. Carl, good to see you. Nice winter storm. Morning, everybody. Morning, winter storm. We have the topic that I wanted to get into, and I'm going to dive into this right away, but it goes along with what you're saying, is the process.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I think yesterday, at least, because we were talking with Seb and we were talking about the mental health walks and how, some of the effectiveness that he's seen come out of it, I think what it allowed people to see is that it's okay to talk about this stuff. And it's okay to go through the process not only by yourself, but with others, or to go through a process or any process with other people. But the reason I want to talk about this is because we have people that are in the process as well throughout the whole thing, right? Like, Tanya, you have a process for your art, I imagine. Andrew, you have a process for dealing with your own issues, as I do. I'm sure, Shaun, you have many processes that have been would have been set into a subroutine and then added upon, right? But let's break it down a little bit. What does the process mean to you? I'm going to put Tanya on the fire. What do you think, Tanya?
God, the process. I found that I say this, I overuse it, but I do try to know the way broadly, and I have gathered that the process is honestly, it's the way, and it is everything. It's less destination than it is, journey before destination kind of thing. And the process is for me to have a chance to get to know myself better, get to understand others in the world better, and to face some really difficult things. That's what I've gathered for me.
I like it. Andrew, what do you think? What's your concept of the process?
Yeah, man, that's a deep question. I think for myself, in the current state that I'm in, I had to even recognize that there was a reason to have a process. I started both my careers as a young man, and it became, it was so routine and so ingrained into my life that there was really no room for independent thought. So once I started realizing that, hey, you're a little bit messed up, you're injured. For me, that's when the process started, and it started by sort of identifying in myself those things that needed improvement. And as I think you are, as for myself, a soldier, a police officer, this is sometimes a detriment, a bit of a fixer. So I started into how can I fix myself, and then go and do and motivate that, that self-motivation that I didn't really need before because my life was planned out for me. And go after those things. And it's ongoing, and it's a constant evolution, and it's ever changing. So, what my process was this morning will be different tomorrow. So
I like that. I like that a lot. Shaun, what do you think? What's your concept of the process?
Well, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge, which I usually don't. I usually don't even use the word acknowledge. I just like to acknowledge the two comments that were just made by our guests, which were both different in their own way. The answers or their comments, their ideas were both different, but they were both kind of the same. And I dig that. Everyone thinks a little bit differently about the process. In fact, some people don't even know how to spell the process. So there's various levels to the game of understanding what the process is. But because it's so ill-defined, because you can't buy a manual called The Process, which is a #1 bestseller on the New York Times list, it just doesn't exist. There's many books out there that describe the process, but it's for all of us to interpret all of those books and for us to take away our lessons in shaping what we feel the process is. Has anyone ever bought the book called The Process?
No, I think
I
could probably write one.
Probably. But again, whatever we wrote, even if the four of us combined forces today to write a book called The Process, we probably couldn't agree on what the process is.
Yeah.
Because no one's really ever categorized it as such. And so my idea of the process is similar to you guys. Maybe just a little bit different based on, I feel like I've been in the process maybe a bit longer, only because of my age, my stupid age. So I do feel it is as simple as Tanya stated. It is the way, it is the path, it is the direction forward, whatever that means to you. Now, it took me a lot of years to take that simple statement and build it up into something that had meaning, substance, had subroutines in it, had depth, had a 360, we'll call it. And then it took me a whole pile more years to Occam's razor that and strip it down until it was just back to the bare essentials of it's just my way. It's my process. It's the path. So when people come to see, not to see me, God, that sounds so dumb. When people come and visit me or people hang out or whatever, and we're gonna chirp back and forth at each other about the process. My way is my way. And either you like it or you don't. And if you don't like it, move along. And if you like it, stick around. But I know this to be true. My process works for me 100%. And I also know my process, whatever it is, works for a bunch of other people who've engaged in the process. But each process is different for each person. And so if I was going to write a book about the process for 10 people, it would be 10 different books. The general theme, as I believe it to be, is similar, but different for each person. And so the devil is in the details on the nuance of how fast you want to move someone. You can apply one book against the entire planet called The Process, and everyone would move forward. But it's the velocity, the expeditious movement, the efficiency of making someone a better human being. Well, that takes a little bit of boutiqueness, and that's the rewriting of every book for every person. That's not much of an answer, but maybe it'll get us started. I don't know.
It's one of the big challenges with the concept of the process, right? Is that it's in the name, the process, and it really is. It's not a process. It's not the process. It's not a singular thing. It is just process, really, in terms of it. And as much as we could say, hey, this is the way forward, I don't think any one particular person would ever be able to create a plan that would suit everybody. As you said, I think it's a very boutique thing, and I think we have to figure it out. That's part of the process, is figuring out our process.
But there are some essentials. So we could probably establish the foundation of the process for each person on the planet. And I think they would all it would all be the same for everyone, I think. And it would be to sit down. And now I'm going to make this super simple. I'm going to leave out even some preliminary steps, like all of the struggles that a person has to go through to get to this point. But at some point, when you get to the, what the heck am I doing? What is this all about? Where am I even go? How do I do this thing? How do I get better? Stop. Grab a pen and a piece of paper. Sit down at the table and don't get up from the table until you write down your why. Why are you here? Why are you doing what you're doing? Why? What is it all about for you? Why? Once you've figured out your why, I want to serve. I want to be all that I can be. I want to be the best coffee roaster in the world. I want to learn how to play Frisbee golf. Whatever it is, your why. It doesn't matter small, big. It doesn't matter deep, shallow. Doesn't matter. Pen, paper. Don't stand up until you've written down an answer for your why as to why you're here on the planet right now, as best as you can describe it. And then once you've written it down, stare at it, and then put another little word called how. So now you need to write down your how, and you can keep it super simple. That can take you 5 minutes. Now you've got your why, and now you've got your how. And then the last piece, and here's the part where it all falls apart. Apply a priority to it. What's your priority? I know why I'm here. I know how I'm going to do it, generally speaking. But now I've got to think about, do I apply an ounce of sweat? Am I scared of a drop of sweat? Or am I willing to do what it takes to achieve all of those hows to get to my why? And again, that's where it all falls apart. And I will describe it simply as such. Lots of people have lots of ideas. Those are called thoughts. Those thoughts don't translate into anything if you don't apply action. Mm-hmm. So you have to combine thought and action in order to receive an outcome. And it's as simple as that. People don't get the outcomes that they want because they skip that middle part called action. And the actions, that's the suck, man. That's the adversity. That's the hard stuff. And if you feel that your velocity is not moving ahead as fast as you want in your process, it's probably because you're not embracing the suckage enough. Because to move ahead, it requires adversity.
Indeed, it does. Andrew, what do you think? Do you think that would be a good foundation of what the process is?
It's more than good. It's polished. I mean, it's very, very thought out. I mean, how do you? The whole time I'm thinking, how can I add to this conversation?
That's good. That's great.
There was-
I'm a huge fan that you're thinking that.
Yeah, I know.
Because
It's
I've spent a
thoughtful.
long time thinking it myself, and
Yeah.
I'm still trying to polish it. If you've got a way to polish this up, dude, I'm driving to your house and shaking your hand.
No, it's. I think what stood out for me the most, and it's early on in your description of it, is how it is different for all of us, but why. I mean, all of us in our lives, the relationships that we have, and piggybacking maybe a bit on what you guys were discussing yesterday, about communication. A lot of times in the process, we forget that we have some great allies, and having that's a force multiplier, right? Those allies that we can build, our family members, our close friends, those like here in this virtual room that have a similar goal or outcome for our friends, to involve people in your process. It doesn't have to happen in a silo, right? The more people you have, not, to a certain extent, hopefully the more success you'll have. So
I like that. I like that a lot. It also really applies to, part of that process is figuring out who your circle are, right?
Yeah.
And if you realize that your circle is not advantageous to you, that part of the process is finding a new circle.
Yeah, it all requires thought,
Yeah.
The whole thing, the whole big game that we're in, this puzzle called life, it all requires thought. And once you realize that you're not doing it well, your next thought should be, oh, I haven't been giving enough thought.
Yeah. What do you think, Tanya? What's the foundational wise to the process? Do you think we've hit all the markers, or is there something else that you could polish this with?
I mean, it's real hard to polish Shaun's process because he's got a few years and a few experiences, practicing. I guess I wrote a bunch of notes, but I wrote, for me, I think the first part, when you mentioned write down your why, and he's actually had me do it, and it is actually really effective. But for a while, that I realized it didn't have a clear why, or probably more accurately and honestly, is I had a why, but I was just too damn chicken to actually go and learn and go after it because of various internalized belief systems. But so that lack of a why scared the crap out of me, and then I wanted to skip the hard part and just do whatever without any intentionality or directionality. So that was the first note. And then as I was listening to Shaun, I realized there were quite a few parallels in the process that I learned in art school. I went to a school in Calgary, and it was a pretty like rigorous design program, and it was very intense. But I realized later that they taught me the process, and that was something that I applied pretty much to the rest of my life. And I guess I just wanted to run it by Shaun or whomever, and he can. I'd like to just discuss it and see what parallels and contrasts there were. First step was understand the problem, which is the why. Like, what am I? Instructors are like, if you can't sum up what you're trying to draw or what you're trying to do in like 2 sentences or less, you don't understand it well enough. So go and figure this out and research and explore until you do. Then most people get stuck in this stage, which is like ideate, which is after you research, you make thumbnails and sketch. And that's called like blue sky thinking, anything's possible. And it's a lot of fun. And that's where I've actually gotten stuck, because after that, now you're playing for keeps. So you get feedback. So someone looks at your stuff and gives you feedback as to what is successful, what isn't. And then you start foundational studies and trying to problem solve, right? You actually have to start winnowing down possibilities, and that scares me. And then you do like rounds of feedback, and then you start sketching. So by the time you get to like the first sketch and all like the subsequent things for the final painting, that's just execution. You should have done all of your problem solving well before then. And that was like a really, really important step for me, is to separate strategy from execution, and also just to do the damn thing. And then once you finish all that, then you go back and you reassess and you put it in front of somebody and go, what could I have done better? And that's also something that took a long time for me to get through, to get brave enough to do, because it's brutal. And thankfully in art school, you stand in front of all your peers and present your stuff, and your instructor will tell you what was successful and what wasn't, and you kind of get inoculated against feedback really quick. So that was my general process in art school that I learned, and I feel it's applicable to most things, and I'd love to hear, I guess, your guys' thoughts on it.
I think it applies quite well. Andrew, what do you think? Can you apply those skill sets to mental health and moving through the journey of self-healing?
Yeah, a couple thoughts during that. One is it didn't sound too different than my heart assessed doing my recce patrol, right? The whole thing, right down to being assessed by your peers like an AAR at the end. The process is so well established amongst so many organizations. Individually, though, what I was thinking there is part of the process for me when it comes to mental health and mental wellness is when talking about your peers, although a professional peer, but speaking to somebody that can help you establish your continually changing baseline. How I am today doesn't reflect on how I am tomorrow. And I've found great value in not only peer support, so more formalized peer support, informal peer support, and then, having someone I go to the operational stress injury clinic still, weekly to biweekly to work on myself. And that's part of my process. It helps me get to the action, because oftentimes I have some sort of hang up in between thought and action, and going and discussing that amongst any three of those groups often helps me get to that action. So, yeah.
I like that. Shaun, what do you got? Thoughts on the process from
Yeah,
Tanya?
I do. That's great. Between the two of you, we're at a good point now that I can jump in and ask a couple of questions, or maybe not questions, make a couple of observations and build out of that. So you were both kind of saying the same thing. You both get through a process that may or may not be identical. We'll call it similar. And you get to a point now where you're, for lack of a better term, being adjudicated or being evaluated or being not judged, but it's a feedback loop. It's at the end of the feedback loop, and you're now getting a sense of how you did, we'll call it. And so now you've got feedback. Guess what? That's a freaking luxury, man. That's a luxury. What a gift that you just got some feedback on how to do it better. That's what it's all about. I mean, if you're lucky enough not to have to go through a metric ton of failures until you finally get a tiny little feedback point, well, shoot up the fireworks. If you're getting feedback at the end or the kind of completion of a loop, you're getting feedback after every loop. Wow, that's amazing. So what a gift to get feedback and then know how to improve upon that. I just see these as tiny little repetitive feedback loops of, oh, you gave me something to work on. Awesome. Now I've got something to work on. And it's not like you're starting a reset button of I'm back to day 0. I've got something to work on and build off of. You're back to whatever, day 1 million, day 1,000. Doesn't matter what the number is. You're just simply building off the day before or the task before or the feedback loop before that, every time just trying to do it a little better. And that's kind of, again, where things fall apart is, as you've people have heard me say from time to time, the relentless pursuit of excellence, which is one of the ethos of Tier 1. And so whether it was beaten into me, or Jedi mind tricked into me, or I took the red pill or blue pill, who knows, but it's me now. They did it. And I pursue it. And so I think everyone can. As I was saying to Satch this morning, we were talking about how some people, he was using me as an example, just never stop. It's a consistent, relentless pursuit of excellence. And that doesn't mean that it has to be constantly arduous, but I do turn up the rotary dial more than most. And I'm comfortable with it. I'm used to it. And that's the thing, man. If you're a 3 out of 10 on the rotary dial and you're feeling uncomfortable, hang in. Just keep nudging it a little bit more every time until you get to 4 out of 10. Eventually, you'll be doing what I do, weird things, and it's a non-factor because you're just used to getting after it. And the pace that you set for yourself just feels normal. 9 out of 10 feels normal. And so the relentless pursuit of excellence builds you into a person as you get older and older and older that is willing and able to accept more and more and more. And at some point in the process, it simplifies itself because you've done it so many times that you just flow through it, and you don't get too worked up about the process. My process on podcasting started off rough, but I know the process. I've done it too many times, not podcasting, of course, but I sucked. I stunk up the place. I might have been the worst podcaster ever. Couldn't even call it podcasting. Still makes me comfortable to say podcasting out loud. I have to call it poddy in my house. So podcasting, that's the start for me. It was hard, man. One of the hardest things I've done for sure. But I understand the process. I engage. I commit. I made a deal with myself that I was going to get after it. And I have. I haven't stopped. I'm now coming up on, I think, 240 live chats this year.
Yeah.
That's not what I wanted to be doing, but that's what you got to do. You got to do the work, and not just once or twice or 100 times. It never stops. You just keep pursuing excellence.
Yeah. Andrew, you had a thought?
All I kept thinking when he was talking about that is the joke about cranking it up to 11. I wanted to say it so bad. So why can't we just crank it up to 11?
Everybody does. Every time I say it, everyone thinks the same thing. For sure. They all make the movie reference.
It's true though.
Yeah.
Too true. Just one quick, Carl says, the process is coming to an understanding inside that you gave your all to better oneself or a situation, relationship, etc., whether in the build-up or the debrief. I think that's pretty accurate, because I think this is a big part of it. Do your best. There you go. Thank you, Shaun. That's it.
Well, it speaks to Shaun's talking about the pursuing of, the constant pursuit of excellence, right?
Yeah.
There's a good book out there, The Habit of Excellence. I'm not sure if you've had the opportunity to read it.
No.
It's a lieutenant colonel from the British Army. His name's escaping me, but I can share it to you in the chat.
Yeah.
And it is, it's very military centric, of course, but it does talk a little bit about the process and how that habit of excellence is built into soldiers right from day one with leadership. So, it speaks also to what you had said, Shaun, as well about, there are those of us out there that whether it's a, good, there could be arguments for both good or poor character trait, but that constant pursuit, that I think that ties into velocity. Like, you can still be in constant pursuit of excellence, but sometimes the velocity has to be toned down a little bit lest you burn out, which I'm sure all four of us has hit that at some point in our life, right? So
100%.
that's my reflection on your comment, Shaun. Turn
like
that
it.
stuff up to 11.
just jack it right up there. The one point I wanted to come back to, and I thought it was really great, Tanya, when you had said the fact that you have to, the ideation phase, right, where you have to actually come up with a plan and then execute against that plan. And I think it's something that we all, I think I can say for all of us, we've probably all got caught in that at some point where we get into this like, oh, this would be cool. Oh, that'd be cool. And then you start moving without actually having a plan. You're just doing stuff because this would be cool and that'd be cool and that'd be cool. I'm going to do that one. I'm going to do that one. At least I've done it before. And it's very easy to get distracted from the overall plan, from the mission, from the why. It's very easy to go, cool, I'm going to try that. And then 2 minutes later, ooh, I'm going to try that too. Oh, I'm going to try one of those. I'm going to try these things. Like a kid in a candy store, right? You just start looking around going, everything is awesome. I'm going to do all. But you're not actually making it through the candy store. You're not getting to what it is you want. And I likened it to, in my head, was dealing with a minefield for me, is that if there's a casualty in a minefield or someone hits a mine while they're in a minefield, everything stops. But there's people that will run into the minefield without hesitation or thought, like medics. They'll see somebody hurt and they will start storming in, trying to get to the casualty to start their work. And it's part of the job as an engineer, if you're clearing an area, to make sure that they don't do that and just run off half-cocked. But it is to come up with a plan, figure out how to get the route to the casualty. What are we going to do? Do we need to start working our way out as well as in? Do we need, like, there's a whole bunch of planning that needs to happen. And then once that plan happens, and we go, okay, everybody good? You're good on the plan. You're good on the plan. You're good on the plan. Good. Now we start to work. But without that, everyone would everyone would be all over the place. Somebody be clearing that way, guy would be clearing that way. There'd be a medic running into the middle of the field. Like, there'd be all kinds of stuff happening without any actual work being done to the mission itself. Have you guys ever experienced those points in times where you just get so distracted that you've lost sight of the mission?
You mean my year's birth from
sorry,
last week?
just let's establish what we're talking about. You've just described the institution rather than the casualty.
What do you mean?
So you're talking about how things work at an institutional level rather than talking about the casualty who's laying in the minefield, how they work.
True.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So we're talking about mental health, and you're talking about, there's people running around or not. Maybe they have a plan, maybe they don't. Hey, bring a stretcher. Hey, where's the sandwiches? That's the institution. That's called Veterans Affairs Canada, or that's called the military, or that's called, whatever, your therapy network, or that's called your whatever. Yeah. That's the place you go to ride the horses to feel better. That's that whole thing that's running around trying to figure out the plan. Meanwhile, you're the casualty. You understand?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So to clarify, what I mean in terms of a larger scale was that I was the institution. Let's put it that way. So my plan was to go help the casualty. My initial goal was to help the person that was down. And there's been lots of times where without so much as a plan, I've just started going. And it has led me down multiple 7, 18, 19 steps down different paths without actually ever making any headway to what it is I initially wanted to, which was saving the casualty. Does that make more sense?
No, I'll take it right back to the point I was trying to make. So the casualty is you, Chance Burles.
Okay.
You're not the guy running to save the casualty. That's called therapists, or that's called Veterans Affairs Canada, or that's called the guy who owns the horses that teaches veterans to calm down while they're riding horses. You're the casualty laying in the minefield, wondering when someone's going to come help you. You're in the hurt locker.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And all the ideas are going through your head. When's someone going to come help? Who's going to come help? When they come help, what are they going to do? They're going to grab me by my body armor and drag me out? Or are they going to levitate me out? Or are they going to airlift me out? You don't know, but you're thinking all of those thoughts, wondering, I need help. Who's coming to help me? And how are they going to help me?
Mhm.
That's the process. The end user, the individual, the person in the hurt locker. The large institution is basically a different conversation as I see it. Does that
You're
make
right.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're right. You know what? I was falling into my own trap of external proxy.
I believe so.
Yes, good call. Thank you for that clarification. As the casualty, the from military wise at least, the first thing you're supposed to do is self-aid, right? Look after yourself. If you need a tourniquet, put a tourniquet on. If you need bandages, put bandages on. If you're in a minefield, start clearing your way out. And that was where I was going to go with this, but I appreciate you shortcutting that for me.
Reverse
there.
engineering it. Yes,
Yeah,
Jack.
I appreciate that. But it is, you're right. When you're in those moments as the casualty, you could be thinking all kinds of things. And number one of them is going to be, who's going to come help me? Where somebody needs to come help me. And it becomes you can feel safe in that position of someone's going to come help me. Someone's going to come help me. Why is no one helping me? Why is no one helping me? And then you realize that it's just you.
Well, that's always been the case.
It's
Forever
true.
and a
100%.
day since cavemen picked up clubs.
But I
And
don't
so
think people realize
it's
it,
our
though.
job to understand that the first step is not waiting for help. The first step is helping ourselves, even if we don't know how to. You could be on day one of basic training. You fall on your silly head, you pass out, you wake up next to the obstacle course, you start figuring it out. You don't lay there crying until someone shows up and lifts you back up and dusts you off. You got to figure it out. That's what we were all taught. Now, that doesn't make it easy. That doesn't mean that self-aid is easy. It just means that that's the first step. And self-aid, by the way, might just be as simple as this. Holy moly, I just got blown up.
Yeah.
If that's all you can think, that's better than just laying there static and not thinking about what just happened, ignoring the fact that you just got blown up, just laying there and waiting for help so someone can tell you, dude, you just got blown up. So, first aid or self-aid or help yourself first in order to get others to start helping you is probably pretty critical to the process in respect to mental health.
I would say
Well, that's
so.
a grounding, right? That's the first part of that process is, firmly grounding ourselves and where we are and what we're facing. After you do that, that's when you can start coming up with your own internal plan. And you talk about that self-aid and, even if we don't know how to do it. And I think, the movement of, individuals like yourselves, there's so many more people out there, really actively, outside of the institutions trying to look after veterans, that hopefully those mistakes are less and less. Although I'm sure a lot of, self-medicating as an option for that first part of self-aid still happens, risky behavior, etc. like that. But, putting stuff like this out there, that's just getting to more and more of our brothers and sisters. So yeah, back to what I said before.
I agree.
Yeah.
And what is super helpful is not that I appreciate what you just said. Well, I do, but what I do appreciate even more is the fact that you're calling out the idea that the more all of us can talk about this kind of stuff openly and nod our heads and not pretend that it doesn't happen. I mean, it's cool, man. I mean, it's what's supposed to be happening. It should have been happening a long time ago. I don't know why it doesn't happen more. And
I think at one point it did a
did
lot.
it? I don't know.
Not in our generations. I'm talking, in the beginning armies in the
Oh
tribes.
yeah. Well, I agree with that.
Thousands of years ago. I think it
Yeah,
was
I
a
agree with
common
that.
thing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tanya.
I just had a question because upon listening, I guess to you types, so to speak, I've gathered that, and same with writing, you fall to the level of your training, right? You don't rise to the occasion, or however that saying goes. But how much training do they provide military, law enforcement, various people with mental health practices, like the mindfulness, something as simple as practicing like asking or saying the words "I need help" to somebody? How? Because I found that there's so much stigma and pressure to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, and not put forth any vulnerability, that when it really counts, like when you're really struggling, you can't, it's really difficult to do something you've never trained for, right? So I'm just wondering how much of that is instilled in the institution.
I'll go first since
Yeah.
I'm the oldest.
Well, we got 3
and we'll
different
be able to-
generations here, so
That's
it's
right, 3
perfect.
different. I'll start with the first generation. Generation 1.0, the old Terminator, the cranky one.
You had bayonets and everything.
So for myself and my generation, those words, mindfulness, hadn't even been invented yet. And mental health, the only 2 times those 2 words were combined together in a sentence was, dude, you're mental. You're never going to be healthy that way. And so, like, the 2 words were never combined into a thing called mental health. So it was usually derogatory. So they didn't exist. Now, the irony of it is, the first time I ever heard an army guy or military guy talk about mindfulness was me. On Chance Burles's Tools for the Toolbox podcast, the very first podcast that I ever went on.
Yep.
Talking about mindfulness, and I felt like there was all kinds of patchouli and namaste going on in the background because it was a super weird moment for me. But I was trying to do right by the community in a topic that isn't talked about and was uncomfortable for me. But I just was trying to do it right for the big team wrapped around me. That is the first time I ever heard mindfulness by any army goof like me, you know?
It's funny because it was your idea. Well, it was kind of my idea, but
it was kind of your idea.
Yeah. You had mentioned something about, starting your coffee in a mindful manner first thing in the morning, or starting your day with a mindful moment. And you were talking about it, your coffee and how you actually take it. And I was like, ooh, that's a great idea. Let's talk about mindfulness, thinking that was a normal thing for you to. And then once we actually started talking about it, I started to realize that was wasn't quite what I had thought it was, which turned out to be an excellent conversation, though.
It did. It was all right.
And for my generation, from the 2005-ish to 2013, it was talked about, but it was talked about. I'm not going to say negatively, but it was talked about it like it was frivolous. Like it wasn't really necessary. It wasn't really a thing. It was just, the powers that be want us to talk about mental health and readiness. Okay, so everybody needs to understand that your mental health is important, and it was talked about in that manner. Like, oh yeah, okay, just go through it. No. And we were PowerPoints and all kinds of presentations, and it wasn't until people started coming back from multiple rotations going like, I'm broken. Like I need to actually see somebody about this. And even then, that was well past when they should have started seeing somebody, right? Where you would fight to the point that you couldn't go to work, and then you would maybe ask for help, or maybe you would go to, you'd get charged with AWOL 2 or 3 times, and then you would be forced to go see help. So it was talked about, but it wasn't really talked about seriously. Let's put it that way. Andrew,
actually, I've heard that, but I've also, and you kind of touched on it, but not maybe to the degree that at least I understand. And that is, it was touched on, but it was also frowned upon. And I know
100%.
you kind of said that, but I just want to emphasize that it was really frowned upon.
Yes, to the point that your career could be over by putting your hand up saying, I need help. Your career would be done.
Which is so ridiculous.
It is. What about now, Andrew? What do you think?
I was going to say, I did stick my hand up and my career is done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the way it is. Like I
but
was
good for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, but this is not a complaint. It's fact. Right. I had to make a decision whether or not I would, live or not. That's what it was coming down to for me.
Yeah.
In 2017, I made a decision to get a service dog, and I just went to my employer and said, I get him on Monday. What do we do now?
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. A few. And you know what? And what I will say is, other than I'm medically retired from policing. I mean, WSIB is trying to get me to do something else. They actually called me while I was on with you guys here. I won't go higher. I won't see where I had originally thought my career would take me. And for the most part, my service has been very supportive of me. Now, the military, I think they're anecdotally supportive. I was an NCM. I commissioned a number of years ago. I've been an LT for almost 5 years. Tell me where in the service anywhere else in the CAF that happens.
Yeah.
They'll tell me a bunch of reasons why, and I have to believe them, and I have to continue on that process. But to the question, I did have a moment at a range 2 years ago with a very senior corporal who's now retired. A couple tours in Afghanistan, one in Kuwait. Was a police officer in Edmonton, was the first on scene to line of duty death, and then left due to his injuries. He started a conversation with me around a fire. We were actually allowed to have a fire at this range. And the whole crew, so it was a small platoon, there was maybe 20 of us, quieted right down when he was talking, because he had that informal leadership. And I responded with my own story. And to such a surprise, every single member around that fire shared their own story of struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And I was blown away. And in fact, I went to bed with the biggest smile on my face. I truly believe we're just a couple of promotions away from real change in a lot of different services, whether that be in the military or emergency services. I think people are starting to get it. It's normalizing. Some stigma has been crushed, but there are still some people in influential positions that choose policy over people. And we're not done this fight, but the education is there. And for me, I think that would have changed my life if, as a 19-year-old recruit, someone actually had a conversation with me about mental health. But it's not universal. Example, last week I did 4 talks with a local fire service, a full-time fire service, about mental health, introducing foreign concepts to them, like what is an OSI? What is PTSD? What is a PTSI? Moral injury, sanctuary trauma. They hadn't heard any of this.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still a lot of work to do, but it's coming.
Yeah. I think it goes to the concept of the process anyway, right? Is you got to not only figure out what the problem is, but acknowledge that there's a problem before that, right? And within ourselves or within an organization, if you don't think there's a problem, you're not going to do anything about it, right? If you don't think that you need to do any work towards something, then you're not gonna. We got a quick comment here. Any thoughts on that before I jump on?
I do.
Yep.
I'd just like to not build off of that, but just touch on it a bit more. And that is, you'd said we're just a couple of promotions away from some, maybe notable change or some relevant change. And you're probably right. But here's also what I think. We're just a couple of podcasts away from making some notable change. I tell myself that on a pretty regular basis, to be honest, like, what are we changing here? Are we changing the entire world, or are we changing one person? One will do for today.
Mm-hmm.
One's enough for me. And so that's the way I like to look at things. We're just a couple of podcasts away from changing the world to some degree.
I like it.
Yeah. What I say when I do my talks, and sometimes there might only be 3 people in the audience. It's not the size of the audience, it's the impact. So
yeah, 100%.
I have a comment, but I can wait till
Absolutely.
after.
No, give her.
I found like the process writ large. I mean, that's your life and your choices and actions and inactions and all of that. It weaves into a story, right? And when it ends, I've discussed this with Shaun, like that story can now be, stories are powerful lessons. And although your career didn't go the way you wanted, what you're doing now, it starts building a story that, you know, someone like that 19-year-old recruit can look at your life and be like, okay, these are the lessons he's learned and these are the steps he's taken, and this is, and learn from that, and it impacts them. And sharing that, much like your instance of sharing it in the around the fire, that's, you know, we've been doing that since the dawn of man, just talking and sharing stories and connecting, and that's something that's so important and missing. And I know, while I've had to refine my process of sharing my story over the years. Sometimes it can be too much or not the right information. I I found that sharing my stuff with my mental health struggles and like complex PTSD and things, openly, I've gotten, not only have I gotten comments like, you know, thank you for doing so. It makes me feel less like I'm a failure or a monster. But there's also been people who are like, for whatever reason, they're like, I need help. I'm not doing well. You talk about this stuff with a level of comfort, and I don't know if, you know, I just simply, I need help. And I'm like, I can't, you know, I'm not qualified to help you, but here are groups like, you know, the work that you're doing, or Chad Roby Show's work. And here you go. And like, I've had veterans for whatever reason, like, contact me, and they're just like, you have no idea the impact that you've made on me just for having shared your stuff, and just having listened. And yeah, that's all I had to say, is just that these stories impact more people than you could ever imagine.
100%.
I agree. The stories are important because, you know, you'll forget statistics in a split second, but you won't forget an impactful story. You know, we've all heard them, and they just won't go away. They just lodge themselves in your brain. And so you only need a dozen impactful stories to carry you through for the rest of your life in some instances. I mean, let's face it, we're inundated with too much stuff. You know, there used to be things called like Arctic explorers that didn't have internets. All they had was dogs and some fur. They didn't get inundated with all of the nonsense. They just had a handful of stories, man. That's what managed to carry them through adventures around the world. And then preceding the Arctic explorers, there was people who were like just trying to figure out the jungle. Do you know how many stories they had? Maybe one that was passed down through 12 generations of jungle explorers. You don't need much. You just need enough. But the enough has to be the right enough. It has to be inspiring enough for you in the phase of your life that you're in to carry you forward to that next phase. So I sometimes find that too much can be a bit white noise-ish. Just cherry pick some hardcore, oh yeah, I'm going to get after it based on what I just heard, whatever story it is. The immediate story that comes to mind anytime someone says to me, hey man, like, you know, my knee's bugging me a bit. I don't want to start BJJ. Oh yeah, well, cool. How about you go watch our episode with Mark Ormrod, you know, the guy with only one arm, who's a purple belt in BJJ and does it on the regular. How's your knee? He doesn't have one, and he's still getting it done. And so we all have excuses. We all tell ourselves our own little stories, but our little stories are dumb. You need stories that are awesome. And that usually comes from other people who are kicking ass. And so go find someone who inspires you and thread that into your story so that it can carry you forward to your next phase.
I like it. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. Your stories are dumb, Shaun Taylor. That's going to be
my stories are dumb.
Yeah,
that's
my stories are dumb. That's what it should say. Yeah, my story is dumb.
Sean's stories are dumb. Maybe let's go with that.
There we go. But I think this is an important point in that, you know, the fact that within your own process and within your own understanding, and I think, Tanya, what you're getting at with, you know, people reaching out to you and saying that your story really helped is the fact that it's very easy to fall into the concept that you are different, that you are special, that your story is more difficult than someone else's, right? That I have it harder than anybody else. I mean, we make fun of myself doing pull-ups, right? I mechanically have a harder time doing pull-ups, right?
It's physically impossible.
It's physically
not
impossible for me, right?
You'll
It's just
never
not
be
gonna
able to
happen,
do it.
right? But I can still do pull-ups, right? And it's so the story I told myself at the time was garbage, but I believed it because it was a story that I wanted to hear. And I think that is it's a process, or it's part of the process, because I was in my own feedback loop of, yeah, it's too hard. Yeah, it's too hard. Yeah, it's too hard. Yeah, it's too hard. And I just kept repeating it to myself up until you start to hear stories of other people who are 2 times your weight, 2 times your height, whatever, right? Like you start to look at people like Mark who have one arm and they're rolling around on the mats, going crazy, right? Like once you hear somebody else's story and you go, oh, right, okay, I don't have it that hard. Or, oh, that makes sense because I've gone through something similar. Oh, I'm not special anymore. Someone else has been through that experience and gotten out of it, or and succeeded through it, or and whatever. So I think by hearing other people's stories, especially, it allows us to see that we are not special, right? And that hardships can be overcome. I think that's a important part of it.
I think, yeah, I'd be inclined to agree. And I also, I think listening to other people's stories, I'm losing my thought again, but I'll get it back eventually. It kind of breaks that cycle of your own loop that you've got going on in your head.
Yep.
Not only does it not make you feel less special, of like, I'm the only one on the planet who's had a difficult childhood. Like no one on the planet, has ever struggled. Not only does it, broaden your perspective, it also, I found that sharing and connecting and understanding that other people hurt and have had hardships, it gets rid of shame, because shame is what honestly keeps everyone in that loop over and over. Shame is this little prison that you build and when you go like I've been to support groups for depression and mental health and connecting and just seeing that I wasn't alone, that I'm not this screw up that can't get anything right and I'm the only screw up on the planet. It's other people do struggle, and even though we're struggling, we're all helping each other climb, and then that eliminates shame. It builds a sense of self-worth and community, and then that's how you kind of get out of these things.
Yeah, 100%. We are just about here at time, but any final thoughts before we shut her down? I mean, Andrew,
do you have comments?
Yeah, I got some comments here, but
here's a comment. Yeah, I agree, Tanya. And what you're describing is contextualizing your own life against other lives, and you got to do it. It's part of the process. You can't think that you're working hard if you're not looking around to see what hard work looks like. I'm not saying that you got to keep putting the hurt on yourself. I'm not talking to you, Tanya. I'm talking to the internet. I'm not saying anyone has to put the hurt on themselves all the time, constantly, never let up, which is kind of what I do. That's a process that eventually you get better at. You can run your life any way you want, but you should be contextualizing your life against others that are running it differently, just to see if there's a different or better way to run your program, the way, the path, the process.
I like that a lot.
That's humanity, right? Like we've been that way for a very long time up until recently, is that we're always around other people. We've had a tribe and we get to see and hear other stories. And now we get a lot more noise, as you said, versus signal. And I feel that we've gotten a little bit disconnected from that. And I think it makes things harder. But yeah, just kind of piggybacking on your comment.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. And not only that, we are gregarious by nature, right? As a species, humans are gregarious. We don't psychologically seek being alone. We can seek solitude.
I don't know, man. I disagree. And I will say this. I'm comfortable in my own skin. If I'm the only one left on the planet right now, if you're all avatars, if this whole thing is fake, I'm cool with that. It's no big deal to me. I'm comfortable with me.
Yeah.
And if some people walk into my house right now and say, "Hey, Shaun, how you doing?" I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with me. I'm comfortable with groups. I'm comfortable in whatever. I'm comfortable. And so I think that is an important part of the process as well, is getting to know yourself so that you're okay with yourself. And
sure.
then you can be okay with people.
Yeah, I don't mean that we seek, like, I think we actually do. A lot of people seek just having noise, right? They want people around so it gives them white noise in their brain and they don't have to think about all the stuff because they just have people around them. But I think instinctually, because for instance, you like being by yourself, but you are married, right? You chose to live your life with another person. You have children, so you have people in your house. You have a family.
And
You have a
now
tribe.
apparently I'm married to the internet. So
Yes, of course.
You know,
Well, that's it. Now you have 7 billion people watching.
but it's okay to be
8.
comfortable with that and
Sorry.
comfortable with yourself.
100%.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that's the duality of man or nature, is
Yeah.
you've got to be good at both.
I could not agree more. I that's what I was going to get at, but you beat me to it. So thank
Sorry,
you very
pal.
much, Sean. Cutting me off. But any, we're just over an hour now. But any final thoughts on the process or the process of mental health wellness, process of anything? What do you think, Andrew? I'm going to put you on the fire. Any final thoughts on the process?
No, I don't have any final thoughts on the process, but definitely final thoughts on the chat. Certainly, Shaun, you're just you got a lot of wisdom. I know that that comes with you poked at it yourself. So being the oldest one in the room here, and taking in individuals like yourself and those that when they speak they have value. That's always been part of my process. So thank you for inviting me, having me be part of this conversation, adding to that repertoire of things I can reach back to in order to continue having personal success. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Our pleasure having you. Tanya, any final thoughts on the process or the chat that we've had so far?
Oh gosh, so many thoughts on it. Let's try to
So
pin one
whole
down.
another hour worth.
Yeah, no, it's just that it oftentimes, like the mental health journey that I've been on, it's been brutal but necessary. And I guess my thoughts would be that people need to just practice the process as much as they can, and not reach for just like the simple, easy, quote unquote fixes, and just be patient. Um, and one aside is, like, in art, there's always this period when you're working on a painting where it's a dark night of the soul, when you're just like, oh God, this is a mess. And you just got to hang on long enough to be like, oh, no, this is actually starting to like come together and make sense. And it's that I found to be the most invaluable part of the process, is having that resilience, for mental health and otherwise, is just to get through those really like sticky dark night of the soul periods, because it will kind of come together, and then you'll look back and be like, oh, okay, it's not bad, I got through it.
I like that. I like that a lot. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most important thing I took away from that was the dark night of the soul being the thing that people struggle the most with when they're in it. The weird part is, once you're out of it and you've learned what you needed to learn and you're better or further down the path, you get to look back at that dark night of the soul and now have context. In the moment, it's the struggle. When you're through it, it's the context. And life is all about context, baby.
Yeah.
100%.
I know we're almost out of time, but just for full vulnerability, Shaun is probably smiling because he has been a part of at least one of my dark night of the souls, where I was just like, I was dealing with just, it was bad. It was bad. I don't know, like issues with demonetization, I think, but like suicidality and whatnot. And I was like, let's go for a burger. I need to go for a burger with you. And he sat and he talked. And yeah, I mean, I can attest to, you look back at that moment and those dark periods and you go, okay, I can contextualize this and, grow from it. So it's happened before.
And you did.
I did.
This is the best part, is that, you know, when you're stuck, keep going. If you get to a point where you're really stuck, you got to keep moving. Otherwise, you're just going to stay stuck there. You can always ask for help, but that's part of moving forward. And that is pretty much everything. I do have a couple comments here I do want to run through really quickly before we shut her down. But Carl says, I was cut from work. Up, there we go, because I asked for help with some stuff. However, it also comes down to leadership, and that's a big key. I have worked with leadership that would have taken me on tour once I worked through some things, which is accurate, because the way your leadership handles this stuff is very, very key to managing that process. If it's done poorly, it affects the process. If it's done well, it affects the process.
Well, surround yourself with good leadership. And if you don't have the luxury of being able to choose your leadership, then start looking around for ways to do it better or bounce.
Exactly. Then we got, see here, Chris K says, Canadians need to do better. Proud that you put your hand up, Andrew. Feel for those that are forced to choose between their health and career. It is a challenging choice for sure.
Challenging, but also inspiring.
100%. Carl says, shame and pride are definitely the biggest barriers out there. I think this is one of the hardest things to get over, but it is doable and 100% worth it.
I found pride to be a means of barrier against shame. You know, like,
yeah, you got to move through both of them.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. And then the last one here, fantastic, honest conversation from everyone. I really do appreciate everybody's candor and honesty. And I know it's not always an easy subject, talking about the process and some of the hard times we've dealt with, but I think we did pretty well today. I think we
scratched the surface pretty well,
as we do normally. We're pretty good.
I mean, it's a 10-hour conversation, generally speaking.
It really is. But hopefully, you know, as the audience and us, I know I have learned. I know I have grown as a human being, and I know I am going to build upon the stuff that I've learned today to be a better person tomorrow. And I appreciate everybody doing that with us here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.